I don't see a way out of where we're going, and so
So when you talked about fascism in your last column, you meant
let's call it what it is. Absolutely. I mean,
you think that's where we're heading?
People are pussyfooting around this idea. People are being deported wrongly from the States to an El Salvador jail without due process. What's that? Trump is doing deals for resources with dictators. It absolutely is that, and we have to call it that. I wouldn't work in the States at the moment. I'd worry about them going through my jokes and ending up spending 2 days locked up without my heart medication. I just would worry about it.
Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. My guest this week is the stand-up comedian Stewart Lee. Now, Stewart has just written his last column for The Observer after The Observer's transfer of ownership, and he is on tour with a show called Stewart Lee versus the Man Wulf, which we will explore in terms of what it is. And what he's saying. But Stuart, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, normally this podcast begins with this idealistic question of how would you change the world if you could? Do you have a how you would change the world?
Well, I think one way you could change the world massively is if we could bring to bear upon the internet and upon service providers and upon social media providers some kind of universally agreed standard of truth and of fact-checking. And obviously we're heading into an even worse situation with that, whereby it appears, reading between the lines, that one of the things Vance wants if he gives us a trade deal is for us to abandon internet safety regulations and hate speech and stuff like that. I don't know whether it's so he can create markets across Europe for the tech companies that have bankrolled Trump's government, or whether it's about trying to leave him free to destabilise European democracy and push it rightwards. But I think it's just going to be a major problem, and I think it's really hard to move forward on anything while truth is mutable in that fashion. It's really difficult in stand-up because you sort of come out and do a joke based on something, but now the facts themselves are in doubt. If I get in a cab and talk to the driver, it may be that he thinks that Keir Starmer defended the parents of the Southport killer, and so before you can even talk about that, you've got to unravel these just false things that are propagated by the internet. And so I think that's really going to make a massive difference to democracy and people's well-being and the future of civilization, education, information and news.
Because there is always evidence that they can cite as well. Yeah. I've seen it. I've seen the picture or I've seen the quote.
Well, especially with the speed at which AI is moving, really, because you can fabricate an image and a story, and also AI will generate further AI information simply based on the bulk of information that's out there. It doesn't cherry pick what's accurate. And so, falsehoods will propagate itself. And that makes doing comedy really difficult because we need a commonly understood truth to either agree with or
to know what's funny
or kick against. Yeah. And now it's all out there. Anything's possible.
I mean, this is really interesting because in your last column, you did write, I think someone needs to build a new global news network disinvested from media money men and Trump kneebenders to save objective truth as we know. Now, I thought that was a joke.
I put a joke on it. I put perhaps Andrew Neil could do it.
Exactly.
With the experience he had from setting up GV News, yeah.
So that made me think the whole thing was a joke, as sort of a, oh, well, this is the kind of ridiculous thing that people say.
Yeah.
But you actually believe it.
Well, in the columns and the stand-up, I'm really lucky because I'm able to. I think a lot of the idealistic or extreme things that I have, I'm aware that they can sound ridiculous, but I sort of think them. But I'm able to put them forwards in the kind of clown persona of me, who is a non-realistic person who's got these, ideals, but is also in despair of everything. But yeah, I do think it's true. I think the best thing for Western democracy now would be to say you can't use Google, you can't have Twitter in your country, you probably shouldn't have Amazon, and you can't. I mean, it's Google it is a verb, isn't it? If my kids ask me something, I go, oh, don't ask me, Google it. but Google are changing the names of huge bodies of water depending on the whims of the Trump government.
The Gulf of America.
The Gulf of America. So so we shouldn't be Googling things, and we certainly shouldn't be using it. One of the problems with the columns, for example, and this is a question generally about how do we get information out there, is I didn't really have a social media presence, but I was aware that my Observer columns used to be shared on, say, Twitter, now currently X, in the hundreds of thousands. Now they're in the low dozens, if that, because he has engineered the algorithms to skew everything towards shock right-wing content. And I mean, more people come and see me live than read the Observer, but I'm aware that on some level, that social media was doing the work of letting people know that I was out there doing gigs.
And a lot of comedians have built new comedians have built their careers on social media presence.
Yeah, and also writers and cartoonists and personalities. And it appears, I mean, I'm too old for it, but it appears to me there was a kind of window where lots of great talent was getting through. There's a flip side to that, which is I think it developed a certain kind of culture which developed work in short bursts that were interpretable and consumable on social media. Whereas if you've seen me live, well, Sean Ono Lennon has called me the James Joyce of stand-up. So I think what he means,
it's a sit-down experience.
It's not going to land in 45 seconds. There's normally some of the jokes take 2 hours to make sense, and so it doesn't really suit me. But certainly there've been some great people that were able to get leverage out of that.
But what effect do you think the changing of the algorithms is having or going to have on that whole class of comedians who exist?
It's going to wipe them out. I mean, it's going to wipe them out. It's going to make it really difficult for them. And I think it's on some level deliberate, because
it's clearly deliberate.
Because one thing those kind of right-wing demagogues like Musk don't like is the idea that people are wittier than them and are having a laugh. They hate it. I mean, I sometimes think the whole awful situation we've got into in the world is because Obama did a good joke about Trump at a press dinner.
Yeah.
And is everything, is the death of all these people in Ukraine, is the abandonment of Ukraine, is attempts to destabilize democracy in Germany, is all that an act of revenge for Obama having a good laugh at Trump at the press correspondence dinner? It's kind of, so I think on some level it is about shutting it down. Yeah.
But I mean, does that leave you feeling a little bit smug that you're not vulnerable in the same way because you've ploughed your own path?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I'm not vulnerable is it's quite hard to cancel me or to fabricate complaints against me in bad faith and have me removed from employment. I'm not really on anything.
Yeah.
And so you can be dropped from theatres and stuff, but really I don't have. I try not to be visible, and I know that sounds ridiculous.
It's very odd for a performer.
Yeah, but I don't. I think first of all, I think the obligation for all performers and writers to have to be personalities now. I was just talking to a book editor at lunchtime about this, about how she misses the days where a writer could be a reclusive eccentric, because now even a literary novelist has to have some sort of personality so they can kind of go and sell themselves on things. And you think of someone like Tracy Thorn, who, from Everything But the Girl, is a very good writer.
Yeah.
But partly why she was able to reach an audience is because in the golden age of social media, she was very good at it.
She was big on Twitter.
She was big on Twitter. And middle-aged mums felt they had this advocate who was able to write about their lives in a really witty way. And but writers ought not to have to be. A lot of people become writers because they don't want to have to see anyone. And as a comedian, I think the stage persona is a sort of a construct. I mean, we know that the pub landlord or Dame Edna Everage or whatever or Lily Savage were constructs, but I think all stand-ups are on some level and have to be a kind of a character act. And I feel the character act would sort of be undermined if I was an actual personality in the world as well. This is undermining me now because I seem much more reasonable and happy
than you really are. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I was expecting you to be more grumpy. I have to admit.
Yeah.
I mean, but if you're right about the algorithms and what it's going to do to, I mean, not just comedians but
everything.
Liberals.
Yeah.
You're going to have social media dominated by the right.
Yeah.
And what does that mean for progressives, liberals, people who want to challenge, people who want to oppose? Is it a real back to basics moment where you have to do it for real, in front of real audiences, on pieces of paper?
I think you do. I mean, I another thing I really worry about is context. So I write shows where the ideas sometimes take 2 hours to pan out, and they're not meant to be boiled down into bits. When I've run afoul of people in the last few years, it's where they've been able to take a sentence out without the counterweight bits, and so I do really worry about that. I mean, the writing the newspaper columns with the change in management of the Observer came at quite a good time, really, because it's been getting increasingly difficult to avoid that happening, because there are a lot of bad faith actors who spend all day looking for a bit that they can take out. Lee Anderson was, in the run-up to the last election, stated explicitly, he said the bit out loud that you're not supposed to say. He said, we can win this if we pursue transgender issues as a culture war wedge issue. So they're looking for things that they can take out of context and blow up. And so it's difficult for us to avoid that. Once your work's out there, it can be fragmented. So,
but when you say you're not that well known and you're not a big personality, you do also have an extremely loyal audience who love you.
Yeah, I'm incredibly lucky, and I don't really know how it's happened. I'm really, really lucky that these people come back. I keep thinking the tours will tail off because I'm not on anything, and I don't have a social media presence. I don't advertise, but they hold pretty steady and seem to build.
And who are they?
Well, they're not exactly who you think they are. There's a lot of people that would fit the Guardian reader stereotype, but when I go to Southend or Carlisle or Derby, there simply aren't that many people like that living there. So a lot of people come out. People come out that like comedy, right? They don't have to agree with you. This is another thing. The assumption is everyone goes to laugh at things they agree with. And while I am happy to provide crumbs of comfort towards an ideologically disenfranchised liberal middle class who've been made to leave Europe and whatever, I also like the fact that people come that don't agree with you, but like the skill of the humour. You know what I mean? I think there is something in that. So it's a kind of broader coalition than you'd think.
Do people get annoyed?
Less so.
You have the angry heckler.
Sometimes those people have stopped coming. Sometimes it was orchestrated. There was a period whereby I know pockets of people would come along to try to sabotage it, often based on some misunderstanding they got of the act, based on some bad faith actor on a website or in a newspaper column. But no, they tend not to. There's a good social spread now, but I think I've reached the point now where parents and grandparents are bringing their kids and grandchildren, and they're going, this is what an alternative comedian from the 1980s is like. A bit like I took my kids to see the Sun Ra Orchestra when they were about 9. I thought it was really important that they saw 60s free jazz in full, because I feel it's a dying sort of art form. And the main guy, Marshall Allen, was like 96 at the time or something. But I'm really glad that they saw that. I think I'm like that now. I think they go,
yes, and the cool kids will like you.
Yeah.
I found this old guy called Stuart Lee.
Yeah. I was interviewing Julian Cope once, and The Teardrop Explodes, about 15 years ago. And he said a really wise thing. He said, which I always think of. He said, at the moment, he said, I know I'm a has-been, but if I keep going, I'll be a legend. There's a kind of there's a bit you have to get through. And then if you're still there, people go, oh, fair play.
So how do you? Well, I don't know whether you find your audience, whether your audience finds you. If you're not on social media, you're not really on telly.
No.
You used to be on telly a lot.
I had a really good run. I mean, I had 12 hours of stand-up on BBC Two in a kind of 6-year period where I did 4 series for BBC Two, and no one's really done anything like that since. So I think I was like the last person to do that. The model that I had in mind was Dave Allen.
Yeah.
From who you probably, you might even be 3 years younger than me. You might be a bit young, but because he's. But yeah, I was really lucky that I had that little burst.
So what's happened to TV comedy?
Well, there's a lot less money in it. Channel 4, for example, are making 25% of what they did in comedy 20 years ago, and it's harder to get funding for things that feel specifically British, and I think what I do does, because you're trying to do partnership deals to make programs like Sex Education that are set in a blandly anonymous non-place.
Things that Americans will get as well.
Americans will get as well, yeah. And there's always there's a worry that things are culturally too specific. Although my ex-wife Bridget Christie's show is very culturally specific to a particular kind of white rural British working class, I think, and yet seems to be popular abroad because its specificities become universal in some way. And also, I think the fact that Adolescence did really well might change the way British TV thinks about funding things, because that's set in a very British milieu, but has seemed to be universally understood as being true. But that's certainly a problem of it. So yeah, I mean, it was just I didn't really realise, looking back, the 90s was a bit of a golden age. Certainly my kids, they like to look at Big Train and the Armando Iannucci shows and the thick of it, and they see that as all belonging to some kind of school of comedy, which I don't appear to be included in. I'm kind of going, I used to write for them, actually. But they love that whole time, and we were in that, and you look back at it and you go, yeah, that was really good, actually.
And so, in terms of your show, I mean, your shows all have a sort of, a theme or an idea.
Yeah.
The new show is Stuart Lee versus the Man Wulf.
Yeah.
The Man Wulf is what is the manosphere.
I mean, the reality is approached to this show at incredible speed. Normally, I write them and I feel their relevance diminishing, and then by the time I finish the tour 18 months later, people are going, "What's he bothered about that for?" I mean, there was one I remember where it was all about a lot of it was about Brexit and Boris and whatever, and the whole payoff was something to do with Johnson, and it just went out. It finally went out on TV about a week before he was disappeared, and so it just got in under the wire. But this one is about this idea that there's a certain kind of rhetoric and a certain kind of value system that is informing American politics on the grander scale, British politics a bit, and a lot of the kind of comedy that we see on Netflix, and stand-up comedy. That you could say it's from the manosphere, you could say it's callous, you could say it's ignorant, you could say it's bullying. And it's about how that squares off against liberal ideas. And again, when I wrote it and I tried to embody this idea by dressing up as an angry werewolf, it seemed a bit of a stretch. But within weeks, it felt almost too on the nose. And now people absolutely get what it is. And I have to keep rewriting it, because the things that the horrible American Netflix werewolf stand-up comedian says just simply not nasty enough. As the weeks go by. I have to ramp them up because of the speed at which Trump is degrading acceptable rhetoric.
I mean, the thing that I love about you is that you don't ever hold back from saying or naming the people, and even the publicity for this show names Dave Chappelle, Ricky Gervais, and Jordan Peterson.
I mean, I don't equate them as being the same as.
They're not the same.
It's slightly kind of funny, like two things and a really awful one. But yeah.
But what is it about what Dave Chappelle and Ricky Gervais are doing that you are kicking against?
Well, I think the with Gervais specifically, I think the thoughtless stereotyping of less privileged minorities in order to get cheap laughs. Yeah, and I think that. So
when he says it's a joke, it's not what I think. Well,
it depends. It depends on how the audience take it away, doesn't it? And saying it's a joke, it's not quite enough. There has to be some sort of character behind that, or there has to be some overarching shape to the idea. It's not a get out of jail free card for everything. Particularly, the problem that those people have is we all, in my generation of comedians, particularly in this country, we came out of a culture where even when the Tories were in power, in media and in entertainment, there was a sort of a liberal consensus, right? So when Sadovich started out, and he would say, his opening line was, "Nelson Mandela, what a C word. You lend someone a fiver and you never see them again," while he was in prison, right? To say that to the kind of white liberal social worker audience that were in the audience for an alternative comedy gig is really funny, right? But the problem is those kind of things now are being said by Nigel Farage or Donald Trump, or they're out there. So you're saying you're the same as them.
Yeah.
You're not. It's not some sort of kickback against the
So when Dave Chappelle hits out about the trans issue, he's now with mainstream opinion and the Supreme Court.
Absolutely, he is. He's with mainstream opinion, and he's with he is with a drift towards the right that has left, in the pursuit of clarity, vulnerable people feeling uncertain of how they're perceived by society now and what the way forward is. So I think they, what I noticed with Bill Burr, for example, who's another American stand-up who I suspect isn't right-leaning, but has got a lot of comedy out of misogyny. He's trying to sort of backtrack a bit. Even Joe Rogan, who you could say is probably personally responsible for a significant amount of the Trump vote, is asking questions about due process and things like that, and whether it's right to just deport people to El Salvador. They let this monster out of the box, right? And they were toying with it, and they were playing with fire. And now, as the world drifts towards a reactionary consensus, they need to wonder what part they played in it. And to say it's just a joke, I don't think is necessarily good enough.
I suppose that the defence, if there's going to be one, includes, yes, but the liberal left went too far.
Yeah.
It's the same old argument. Political correctness had the same thing in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
But there became a tyranny of progressives
I understand
as well,
that.
which also needed to be kicked against.
Yeah, I mean, I understand.
And that's what they were doing.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
But the question is, in doing so, you still end up punching down.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as you've said punching down, there'll be loads of comments below the line on this when you put it on YouTube of what a cliched idea that is. And there'll be loads of people that appear on GB News panel shows furious with you for even saying that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm lucky, right, in as much as I'm allowed to have a bit more fun in my act, because I can attack my audience as well for being liberals and progressives. And because a lot of them are liberals and progressives, they like it. That's the thing about those people, is they recognise the stereotype of themselves and they enjoy being attacked for it. I did a benefit for an environmental charity the other week, and I spent the half hour complaining that they were all trustafarians and that they shouldn't block up the road and killing people, blocking up ambulances and stuff like that. But then somebody filmed it, and it looked like it was on YouTube for a bit, and I was very worried about that, because those jokes worked in that room for those people at that point, and I wouldn't want them decontextualized as evidence of what I actually think, because I don't think that. But you can say that to those people, and they like the catharsis of being insulted. I get trans people come up afterwards when I'm selling the stuff afterwards and signing things, and people often say, we're really happy that we can go to your shows, and we know we're not going to be insulted in a really obvious way. The caveat I would have there is that if I do a joke about them, it's going to be original enough that hopefully they're going to have to laugh, because it's not just going to be my shoe identifies as a Wellington or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's going to be like, and I think actually the liberal audience are very good at laughing at themselves. So you can on stage, I can have it both ways, really.
Are you generally? I mean, you sound like you watch the news a lot. Do you have to?
Yeah, I mean,
You're not news avoiding.
I watch news. I watch news and read news all the time. I watch Channel 4 news. I miss the BBC newspapers review. I used to think that was great at 11 o'clock. It's not there anymore. I watch the Sky one, but a lot of the contributors they have are, the binary nature of it is so tedious, you know. And I don't really listen to BBC News anymore. I kind of lost faith in it during the Robbie Gibb era. I just kind of think I don't feel I can trust it. So you know, I read left-leaning and liberal broadsheets and follow up stories. But I always make sure if I'm writing about something, I try to make sure I fact check it and where it's from. And you know, you have to do that now.
But you're not. I mean, a lot of people are finding the news crushingly depressing.
Well,
you're not.
No, I mean, I am.
You are.
And in fact, you know, I was doing a column every week or every 2 weeks for the Observer for 15 years, and it did become increasingly depressing, because it's rapidly. I don't see a way out of where we're going, you know, and so you.
So when you talked about fascism in your last column,
let's call it what it is. Absolutely. I mean,
you think that's where we're heading?
People are pussyfooting around this idea. You know, you People are being deported wrongly from the States to an El Salvador jail without due process. What's that? Trump is doing deals for resources with dictators. It absolutely is that, and we have to call it that, and we have to act in the way that we should have done more quickly in the 30s. And I just got an offer. Will you come and do a week in this club in Chicago? It's not something I'd normally do anyway, because at the moment I'd have to take a huge set of an American cityscape and 2 full-size werewolf costumes. I'd have to get those through American customs at the moment. But I wouldn't work in the States at the moment. I'd worry about them going through my jokes and ending up spending 2 days locked up without my heart medication. I just would worry about it. So I think, yeah, we are heading up. But it is depressing, and I was a bit worried that the topical jokes are becoming like the dance band on the Titanic. Where people will write me these letters and go, the only thing I look forward to every week is at least having a laugh about the news with your column, like crying about so you feel a sense of responsibility as well.
But is it good for comedy?
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, it should be good. I mean, absolutely. Although, of course, Peter Cook always had that very famous joke about when people say, I used to ask him if the establishment club was making any difference. He said it was, let's not forget what a vibrant cabaret scene there was in Weimar, Germany.
Yeah.
Kind of like what. But yeah, it should be good. It should be good. And in fact, also in times of censorship, or when people are afraid of what they can say, sometimes you get really interesting creative work where people are trying to find new ways of expressing things that don't fall foul of official guidelines.
The trouble is going to be how people find it.
The trouble is going to be how people find it, because what's happened to lots of the great liberal satirists that came up through social media in the last few years, they have, to all intents and purposes, been silenced but they in the window after the collapse of print media, which is on the way down. A lot of people, and in the reduction of TV comedy, and in the caution that mainstream broadcasters have about political material, we'll never really know why the MASH report went down, on the BBC. I used to think they were being hysterical, saying that it was closed down for political reasons, but maybe it was. We'd never know. The social media enabled people to flourish in that gap, and I think people had no reason to believe it wouldn't always be thus. And lots of campaigns got traction on it. Lots of the resistance to Tufton Street attempts to infiltrate things like the National Trust or whatever was driven by people organising on social media, and that will be much harder now for people to get any traction going.
So is there? I mean, do you see new talent out there? Do you go and see a lot of comedy? Or?
Well, in the 90s, which is a long time ago now, isn't it? I used to be a club comic, doing gigs 5 nights a week on bills with 4 or 5 people, and I felt I had, until about the mid-noughties, I felt like I had a feel of what was going on. I'd be lying if I said I did now. The only time I see a bunch of new comics that I don't know about is if I do a benefit, and then I see amazing people. I mean, the standard is higher, right, in terms of people's professionalism and their ability to hold a room. But what I do miss is that when I came on the alternative comedy circuit, as it was then called, in the 80s, a lot of the people, it's difficult to imagine what else they could have done. There were people that were just nuts in a brilliant way, like the Iceman, who's got a film being made about him, whose act was that he melted ice, or Steve Murray, who died recently, whose act was that he would just tear teddy bears to pieces, called himself the teddy bear torturer. Or there were people like Sadovitz, who seemed to be able to be in that state, who were really furious to the point where in a different society they might have been locked up. So it seemed to be this space where a lot of quite problematic people were able to rub along and monetize their madness. Whereas now it's the opportunities that comedy presents has necessarily meant that ambitious professional people tend to go into it, whereas before it seemed like a retreat from the world into a hermetically sealed environment where you might be safe.
And do you think the Man Wulf is a phase we're going through? Is everything sort of circular?
Well,
Or
I think that Simon Reynolds wrote about this very well in a book about pop music, where he said, I think it was in Rip It Up, where he said that we grew up viewing popular culture as a series of sections of a rocket that were gradually jettisoned as it moved forwards. But what's happening now is there's so much media out there that everything is available all at once. For example, my kids' music tastes are bizarre, that they cherry pick from different eras. They don't recognize age as an issue. They'll go and see someone really old, whereas we wanted to see people of our age doing things that were new, moving forwards. Yeah. I think with comedy now, it's difficult to make a generalization about it because all sorts of things are available simultaneously in a way that they never quite have been before. There were definitely feelings of phases. It just depends, and we're back where we started, is how do we tell people about it when there seem to be mechanisms in place economically and politically to actively silence and repress certain forms of expression.
I saw an answer you gave in print once about regrets, and one of your regrets was not enjoying things that were popular. Because I think when we were young, it was deeply uncool to enjoy anything that was popular. So you rejected it out of hand. What do you feel you missed out on?
Well, you know, there's loads of things I just didn't. I mean, I was around in Britpop, but I was going to see free jazz while that was happening, and I didn't ever go to raves.
So you're how are we going to get a sort of a regular fix of Stuart Lee now? I mean, like, have you stopped doing columns now, or?
It was very nice for me to have the column because I don't really know how the average person copes with life, but when I see things in the news that really annoy me, I think my next thought is, how do I do a joke about that? I'll write something about it and it'll be funny, and that kind of cures me a bit. And now I'm not able to do that with the immediacy that I could. So I thought maybe once a week I'll film myself doing 10 minutes of news stuff in a club, try and find some way of getting it to pay for itself online. And actually, just in the last couple of days, somebody started talking to me about doing Substack. The problem is that when I was writing for The Observer and when I wrote for TV, when stuff was on TV, highly paid lawyers from competent organisations like The Observer and the BBC would check that what you were saying was, that the setup was factually accurate, even if the punchline was exaggerated for comic effect. And they would also look to see if something you'd said run the risk of being misinterpreted in a way that could be acted upon in bad faith by people. And even with that, there were 3 times in the last 5 years with The Observer, even after the legal checks, where I came close to career-ending disasters in terms of people complaining about things and how they would have chosen to portray me and whether there would be legal action. So I don't think I can really afford to do political comedy as an independent without
the lawyer.
Without the lawyer, yeah. I've gone in the last 10 days from thinking leaving this paper is actually an opportunity to operate and do political satire independently, to thinking I can't lose my house or not be able to live, or we can't.
Because the option would be to play safe, which is sort of presumably impossible for you.
It is. So what I have to do is I tour the stuff for 2 years. I think the next show will be on Sky and Now TV again, and they will help me at the point of delivery to make sure that whatever's in it is not actionable, because I can't. So actually, the chilling effect of how these people nibble away at you is that I probably can't afford to do that independently. I probably can't afford the personal risk of doing topical comedy on Substack or setting up my own YouTube channel or whatever.
And you also sort of rejected panel shows, didn't you? Quite a long time ago.
It was mutual. Look,
it was a conscious uncomfortable.
Okay, creatively I rejected them because I think that in all forms of art, in music and comedy, it's a collaborative process, right? Whereas the panel show is set up in such a way as people are trying to get noticed as individuals, either to win the round or because they want to dominate it to then. And I remember particularly one where I did what I would have done when I was in the double act or when I was working in groups of people, where I set up someone on the other team for a joke by giving them a feed line where I pretended to not understand something, knowing that they could say a particular thing, and they did it, which I'd set up, and then acted like it was a victory. It wasn't seen as part of a collaboration. I don't really want to be a part of that. Also, I felt like it wouldn't really suit the character of me, wouldn't be on them. But also, when I did do them, I was terrible at them as well. I did about 3 when in the year I got married. I was very naive as well. I went along thinking they were what they pretend to be, and then I had the realization that so many of us have, where you realize the writers are there writing the lines for everyone. Most people are take from the writers. Some people would bring in their own writers. The writers might get paid more than that comic's fee for the show, but they wanted to give that money to the writer so that they would look good on it. And it's nonsense, the whole thing. And I can't help thinking there probably is a window somewhere for a show in which comedians generally collaborate and are not being manipulated by producers and writers. Although I understand there's a thing on at the moment called The Last Laugh or something.
Yeah,
and young people
on Prime,
tell me,
which is brilliant.
Young people tell me that is that, and that.
Yeah,
but I'm not going to watch it. But it sounds like someone's thought, what if we actually did this?
Yes,
maybe that would be.
And put 12 comics in a room together, and they like each other.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that? I mean, is the panel show the string quartet on the deck of the Titanic right now?
I don't know. I mean, I certainly don't know. I don't watch enough of them to know. I haven't seen one for 10 years, so I don't know. Yeah, but I mean, I do often think about an interview that Chris Morris gave a few years ago, where he talked about, if you're a political satirist, are you just the kind of jester to the court? You know, and there is a worry of that. And certainly, I mean, Larry David has come out fighting.
I wanted to ask you about this.
About Bill Maher.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Maher went to have dinner with Trump and then came out and did a whole thing about his dinner with Trump.
Yeah.
And said, you know, if only Trump could be more like this in public, then maybe we'd think about him differently. And then Larry David did this very funny reply.
Yeah, it's great.
And now Bill Maher sort of hit back.
Yeah.
Where do you sit in this conversation?
Well, with Larry David, absolutely. And I think you know, look, I mean, one of the problems a lot of us had on the left was that, or in the centre, I'm a centrist dad, of course. What is that when Starmer got in, despite everything that's happened and with Corbyn and everything, a lot of us are thinking, well, it's going to be difficult to do comedy about him because compared to what's just come, he's competent and not actively evil and set on them. But obviously, he's blotted his copybook fairly quickly, and you have to sometimes go against your political instincts to do jokes about people that you might perhaps sympathise with, because you have to look for the angle. But I think no one should be doing anything in support of Trump. No comedian with any sense of the purpose. And
are you happy to excoriate Starmer?
It depends what he does. I mean, certainly the audiences are. I feel like they're expecting it more than they were 3 months ago. You know, that if you're the canary in the mine, then certainly
something's going on.
Something's going on, yeah. And but I mean, it must be weird for Larry David, because of course Cheryl's the actress who plays Cheryl. Her husband is Kennedy, who's dismantling the health, what little health knowledge there is in the infrastructure of American government. So it's incredible. You know, I don't know how those dinner parties work.
But in talking about Starmer, what I mean is, like, you do not feel that as a liberal,
as a centrist dad,
who sees the March of Reform as the big threat to Starmer, that you should lay off. Well, I think Starmer for fear of helping along.
We'll have to see. And it's interesting doing this show at the moment. Basically, there's a story arc to it that I've got to hold on to. But I do 10 minutes. Well, at the beginning, I say, look, over the course of the night, I say to the audience, I'm going to do 10 minutes of liberal stand-up from a liberal perspective. They're going to do 10 minutes of reactionary Netflix style stand-up in a reactionary Netflix way. Then at the end of the second half, I'm going to do 10 minutes of liberal stand-up in a reactionary Netflix way. It's like the stand-up comedy equivalent of the great triptych paintings in the cathedrals of medieval Europe, right? But so it kind of, at the moment, it's an interesting experiment into testing all those things out.
Which bit gets the biggest laugh?
Well, the interesting thing is that it's so easy to do nasty reactionary Netflix comedy. And it's such a surprise that the nasty reactionary Netflix bit is kind of the best bit of the topical stuff. And I think it's partly because that audience enjoy the fact that it's not the sort of thing they should normally see. And also they're off the hook because I'm dressed as a werewolf. But yeah, that kind of plays into the hands of the show, because something is clearly attractive about callousness and cruelty at this point in history that is allowing those sorts of people to flourish in politics, journalism, and entertainment.
So what's the difference between what you're doing in that bit and what Ricky Gervais is doing?
I'm dressed as a werewolf.
I think on that note, Stuart Lee, thank you very much
Thanks
indeed.
a lot. Cheers.
Thanks for sharing your ways to change the world.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that. You can watch all of these interviews on the Channel 4 News YouTube channel. Our producer is Holly Snelling. Until next time, bye-bye.